All right, I'm going to take over control of the screen, if that's okay, and move to
Right
my
ahead.
presentation here. Let's see. Oops. Sorry.
There we go.
There we go. And I thought I had this open and I didn't. Okay, so first of all, thank you all for being here today. I would actually love you to use the chat as much as possible. I think it's really fun to to see other people's ideas. I mean, I'm certainly going to be talking a lot about ideas I've seen and ideas that I know are floating around and some best practices. But I would love for you to participate in the chat and share some ideas of what your organization is doing this Pride Month now that Pride is mostly going virtual. Also, I would love for you to share in the chat whether you own a small business, whether you are one of NGLCC's corporate partners, or what sort of your role is. My business is in LGBTBE, and I think we've been an LGBTBE for about 7 years or so now. So it's been a great community to be a part of. And a lot of what I'm going to focus on today is targeted to organizations. So whether it's a nonprofit or a for-profit, it doesn't matter the size or ideas for all size organizations. But even as an individual, even if you have you know, your own business or you're just here to engage as an individual, there are going to be just ideas of things you can attend and really get yourself involved in lots of the virtual Pride activities that are happening this month. So that's me. I'm CEO of Equality Institute. My pronouns are she and her. So first of all, I wanted to just dig into a little bit about why Pride matters. I think that it's really important that we always celebrate Pride because as a community, we are a higher risk group for COVID. We absolutely are. For lots of reasons, and we are also likelier to live alone. So there can be a lot of loneliness and isolation that has gone along with these months of quarantine. And I know I'm an extrovert, and I have a family that I live with, and even though I have lots of people around all the time, I feel isolated. I feel lonely. I attend a lot of live events here in Chicago, and even though I've been doing some Zoom networking, it's still not the same. So I really miss people. I miss hugs with people besides my family. So, you know, I can relate to the sense of loneliness and isolation. And also, Pride is a really important time to build allies. It's an important time to help allies, straight allies, cisgender allies, become advocates. And one thing that I really love to do is help people make the switch, help allies make the switch from being an ally to being an advocate and really having our back. And Pride Month is a perfect time to start that education and engagement. I like this quote by Alan Joyce, who's the openly gay CEO of Qantas Airlines. He says, "You cannot get the full potential of people in your business if people have to hide who they are and cannot contribute to the organization because they're scared of the impact it will have on their career progression." So I would encourage you, if you do work for an organization and you are looking to create a work environment, a work culture where people feel like they can show up authentically, then maintaining some sort of Pride programming is a really important part of that, because there are lots of important conversations happening in the world right now in diversity and inclusion and beyond. And I think it's just really important to make sure your employees know where you stand, that these issues are really important to you, because when the dust starts to settle, they're going to remember how your organization behaved during Pride, how your organization behaved during these nationwide conversations on racial inequity, how your organization acted as a response to COVID. So all of these things are critically important right now. And thank you, Robert, for the very, very sweet comment in the chat. So this year would actually be the 50th anniversary of Pride. As I'm sure many of you know, Pride began in 1970. The first Pride Parade happened in 1970 after the Stonewall Rebellion in 1969 in New York City. So this is actually the 50th anniversary of Pride, and almost all of the Pride parades have been canceled or postponed. Lots of LGBTQ organizations had their fundraising galas canceled. So it's been a really significant impact on the LGBTQ community for lots of reasons. But fortunately, we are seeing so many different ways to step up and go virtual. And that's actually been really inspiring. And for me, what I believe is that we are a very creative community and we have the technology. So I believe that this is an opportunity, this month is an opportunity to make Pride more accessible, more inclusive, and perhaps even more joyful than ever before. I've talked to so many people over the years who don't attend Pride parades for one reason or another. Maybe they are introverts and it's Pride parades are just too loud and overwhelming. Maybe they are people who live in the suburbs and they don't want to deal with parking in the city. Folks who have kids and they're not sure how G-rated Pride would be for their kids. Folks who have a disability and Pride parades aren't very accessible. So those are all folks for whom Pride may have excluded, Pride parades may have excluded them before. But this year we have an opportunity to include many more community members, and I'm going to share some great ideas with you today on how to do just that. One of the events that's coming up later this month is presented by Condé Nast, and it's a celebration on June 22nd, live streamed. I think probably on the major social media, on them's major social media channels. So there are going to be performances, speakers, like some of the people you see here. Bob the Drag Queen, I love Bob the Drag Queen. I will listen to anything Bob the Drag Queen has to say. I love Leah Delaria. We see people from really, what I love about this event is that it's reflecting the diversity of the LGBTQ community. And I think it's really important this Pride and any programming we're doing to recognize and acknowledge and celebrate the diversity of LGBT and Q, of all of the races, all of the genders, all of the sexualities. This list of performers is incredibly diverse, and I think and generationally diverse as well. So I think it's going to be an amazing event, definitely one that I'm going to check out. So I would encourage you to consider doing some sort of like group live stream. Maybe you have, if your folks are still quarantining within your organization or working from home, have some sort of group event where you're all watching it in your own homes, but you have some sort of group chat going on so you can have a little bit of sidebar conversation. I would encourage you to do the same thing with some of these other events. So Global Pride on June 27th is 24 hours of Pride. And basically, Pride is going to be coming in through all of the time zones around the world. I don't know exactly how they're pulling it off, but it's an event being organized by Interpride, which is the organization of Pride organizations. So the international organization that facilitates conversation between all of the different prides around the world, Interpride. So Interpride is the organizer here, and I guess they're having Pride coming in through every time zone over 24-hour period. So another way to engage in multiple time zones, and I think it's going to be, you have the opportunity to be part of a global event, which is pretty cool. Also, individual cities are hosting virtual events. I took a screenshot here from the website Fab Stays, which actually Robert Geller owns. And there are lots of events listed here on their website. You can see some of them. Lots of the individual cities, their Pride events have gone virtual, and they have different things planned throughout the month. So you can click, I think there are over 250 events listed on this site, and each of these links takes you directly to the event page so you can find out more. So let's just say you are an organization based in DC, like the NGLCC is. You'd be able to go to this website and see, perhaps DC Pride is up here, and you can see what type of virtual event they're having this year and host a live stream chat with your own organization to celebrate. And Robert said, if you have an event, they'd love to feature you too. All right. Like I said, some of the fundraisers have gone online. Family Equality Council, which is a great organization advocating for the rights of LGBTQ families and supporting LGBTQ family building. They have this amazing event every year, fundraiser every year called A Night at the Pier. It raises about $1 million for the organization, but this year they can't host it. But the good thing is that it's going online and it's much more accessible because the ticket price is, I think, donation only. So if you have members of your organization's employee resource group or members of your organization who are LGBTQ parents like me, then perhaps you have some sort of, or at least let them know about this donation only event, and perhaps consider a live stream group watch of that as well. And perhaps if your organization has the ability, any of these events are looking for sponsors. You can go to queerty.com and you'll see that there are lots of voices that they're amplifying here. You can see that they have these 50 different folks who are trailblazing individuals within the LGBTQ community. They're featuring them in honor of the 50th anniversary of the first Pride Parade. You can see an enormous amount of diversity even in just the photos, and that includes gender identity diversity as well. So I think it's a good way to showcase some of the folks who have been trailblazers and leaders in our LGBTQ civil rights movement, or even just in an LGBTQ culture and art. So beyond just sort of the fun stuff, it's also important, again, I would say, to turn your allies into advocates, and even to educate your own LGBTQ employees or yourself about the diversity within our community. For example, I know a lot of folks, or I know some folks who are gay or lesbian, but they don't quite understand trans and non-binary. They don't quite understand what that means, how to use the singular they, etc. So even if we are part of the community, it doesn't mean we understand the diversity of our own community. So an educational content is a great way to educate ourselves and also our allies. One of the things you can do is sign up for the 30-day Pride Challenge. You're going through Rhodes Perry, who is also an LGBTBE. And Rhodes is sending out a 5-minute action you can do every day. You receive an email every day. And it's about how to be a better LGBTQ ally in 5 minutes a day over the course of 30 days. And by the way, I know we have 20 days left, but Pride is not just in June. Pride should be all year long. So educational content, Pride is sort of the time to do it, or the time it's traditionally been done. But LGBTQ education and ally building and programming should really happen all year long, just like we should be sharing information about other diverse communities all year long. It doesn't need to be limited to 1 month. Also, I would encourage you to have an LGBTQ 101 session, some sort of training. So whether it's something that you are teaching yourself, or something that you're bringing in someone like me to teach. My company does a lot of these. So we're doing a bunch of virtual trainings for companies this month. So whether you're having, whomever is doing it, I would recommend to do it as soon as possible, so you can really focus on laying the foundation of what do all the letters mean? How can I be a better ally? And again, this training should have a focus on the diversity of LGBTQ, and again, racial diversity as well as gender diversity and sexual orientation diversity. I would really encourage to make sure there's a focus or inclusion of trans and non-binary concerns as well. So really do this as quickly as possible, because sometimes the most well-meaning allies don't know the right words. Yes, I would say it is similar to a safe space training, Patrice. So yeah, sometimes, a lot of times, the most well-meaning allies, they have the best of intentions, but they don't know what the Q means. And so by giving them the tools and helping them understand how they can be better allies and giving them the right language to use, then we are empowering them to go beyond just being gay friendly to being a true advocate for us. And one of the ways I do it during my trainings, which I've found to be very effective, is I actually talk about laws and policies that do or do not protect our community. I talk about the lack of protections from discrimination in so many states and the bill before Congress. And I talk about that stuff because a lot of times these great straight allies just don't understand that there are systemic barriers to full equality, and that there's actually something that they can do about it. And by having that information, it does seem to really click, and they get the straight women I know who I've given this kind of training to, they get into very like protective mama bear, like, no way, I can't believe you can be fired for being gay in Florida, right? And so I recommend having this kind of session because it can be very powerful and transformative to folks. And I led a session like this yesterday, and I already had people sending me messages on LinkedIn that they have started to change their pronouns. So pretty cool stuff. All right, moving on. Storytelling. I would love to, yes, Amy's adding in, I included least a mention of intersectionality, disability, religion, etc. affect LGBTQ plus people. Absolutely. I didn't define intersectionality, but essentially it's all of the layers of someone's identity, particularly marginalized identities that hold us back. So if someone is gay and white, they have more advantages than someone who is gay and black, or someone who is a gay, black, and a woman. So the more layers of marginalized identities that someone has, the fewer advantages they have essentially in the world. And that is called intersectionality. Storytelling. So storytelling is really powerful. And what I love about storytelling is it brings the emotional trigger of empathy, or at least it can bring the emotional trigger of empathy. And when someone when someone experiences empathy or another powerful emotional trigger like that, like embarrassment is another powerful emotional trigger. When someone experiences that, then they actually feel the need to change. So getting to a place of empathy can be very transformative. And one of the ways to do that is through storytelling. And perhaps some of your employees feel safe to do that, but I would really encourage you not to expect your employees to want to do the emotional labor of having a storytelling event or sharing their own stories, but perhaps some of them do feel comfortable doing that. I would encourage you to have some sort of lunch and learn, maybe a few different lunch and learn events, different stories being told, or maybe you'll have a lunch and learn panel discussion where folks are talking about being out in the workplace. Maybe you'll have someone talking about what it's like to be an ally. So different types of stories that can come up, but it can be extremely powerful towards, again, building more allies, turning allies to advocates, because it triggers emotions which really do prompt change. I would also encourage you to have some sort of book or podcast club or some sort of discussion, maybe for folks who don't want to attend an educational event. Maybe they just would rather read and discuss it, and that's more their speed. So having a variety of different types of educational content can work really well. As you are choosing books and podcasts, I would love it if you would consider the stories and the voices of Black folks, especially now that, first of all, the modern day LGBTQ rights movement began, or some of the leaders were Black and brown and trans, okay? And those voices are powerful. Some of the, there have been some amazing contributions to LGBTQ history from folks who are Black. So people like James Baldwin, people like Janet Mock, people like Barbara Jordan and Barbara Smith. Look up all of these folks, Marsha P. Johnson. These are all Black folks who have had an amazing contribution to our community, to our movement. Bayard Rustin. So the Making Gay History podcast actually has interviews or recordings of some of these folks sharing their perspective, sharing their own experience as part of this movement. So I would encourage you perhaps to use that as a framework for a podcast club if that's what you choose. But books, Janet Mock has 2 memoirs, and she's amazing. And Janet Mock is a Black trans woman who is one of the producers of Pose in Hollywood, and she is also a director, and she's amazing. So you consider getting those stories out there. Another book that I would recommend is called The Great Believers, and it's actually a novel set during the AIDS epidemic. So it's fiction, but it's an amazingly powerful novel talking about a terrible time in our history. So I think that's a great conversation starter as well. Consider diversity as you're creating this content. Another thing I would encourage you to do is have some sort of trivia. And trivia could be a question that you post every day in your group Slack channel, or perhaps in your teams, or your, whatever your community engagement, your employee engagement channel is. Perhaps you're posting it, maybe you're sharing it on LinkedIn, maybe however you do it. I think trivia it gets people talking about LGBTQ history, reminder of where we came from. And again, as you're creating trivia questions, consider diversity. You can actually, if you're doing something like this, so a Zoom meeting, like I'm about to show you, we can use the polling feature for some trivia. And you can actually put people in breakout rooms for team trivia. I'm co-hosting an event in Chicago later this month. That's an LGBTQ trivia night, and we are using Kahoot to host the trivia portion and Zoom to host the engagement portion. So those are a couple of different softwares to check out. But speaking of trivia, I have some questions for you. So I'm going to launch a few polls, and you can guess the answer, contribute your answer, and then I will tell you. So who is the first openly transgender person to be nominated for a Primetime Emmy? Was it Chaz Bono, Elliot Fletcher, Janet Mock, or Laverne Cox? Wow. All right. We have about 2/3 of you voted. Anyone else want to vote? Okay. Well, Laverne Cox is correct. She was nominated for a Primetime Emmy for her role on Orange is the New Black, and Laverne Cox is a Black trans woman. All right, so the next question is, in 1982, which US state became the first to outlaw discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation? Was that New York, California, Illinois, or Wisconsin? Which US state was the first? Well, it would seem pretty likely that California would be the first state to do such a thing, but actually, believe it or not, it was Wisconsin, the first state in the US to ban discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation was Wisconsin. All right, one final question. When was the United States' first gay rights group founded? 1924, 1954, 1969, or 1970? Anyone else want to vote? The answer is actually 1924 in Chicago. I think it was Jonathan. I'm going to ask you to remind me of the name of it. Is it the Gay Civil Rights League? Gay, you know the name of it. I know you do. But anyway, 1924.
The Society for Human Rights, and then followed
Society.
Yeah, then there was I think it was the Sisters of Politis were right after that, and then Mattachine Society came right after that. So it
Hmm.
was one right after the
Yeah.
other.
Yep. So the Daughters of Bilitis, and then yep, the Mattachine Society. So Society for Human Rights, 1924, and that was founded here in Chicago, where I live, and they received a charter from the state of Illinois. So some pretty cool stuff happening in the Midwest. Who would have thought? All right, so the companies that I'm working with actually are getting a packet from me of quotes and trivia that does reflect the diversity of LGBTQ, and the trivia does reflect a lot of like history, culture, a lot of diversity within the questions as well. So if you want to talk to me about that later, certainly let me know. Some other opportunities to engage your employees or engage yourself this month include virtual volunteering, and of course, this month and beyond, um, virtual volunteering. So let's talk about some of those ideas. So first of all, SAGE is a nonprofit that supports LGBTQ elders, and they do some amazing work. There are lots of LGBTQ elders who don't have support from their families, and they are isolated. And so what they have done is they've set up an opportunity for folks to volunteer to connect with these LGBTQ elders by perhaps having a 1 hour Zoom meeting, or maybe it's not maybe it's not Zoom, maybe it's FaceTime or whatever it happens to be, once a week, or just a phone call, just to connect, just to have that sort of community. And I love the simplicity of it, and I just think it's incredibly important. Also, the Trevor Project does have an LGBTQ youth crisis helpline, and it's by, I think they have a text version and also a phone version. Now, there is a 40-hour training to be a helpline volunteer, but the training, the volunteer orientation is all online. So if you have the time, would be a great opportunity to get yourself involved with the Trevor Project, because their calls have gone up twice, have doubled since COVID. So they need our help more than ever. And the volunteer orientation is all online, like I said. And beyond just being a helpline volunteer, they actually need advocacy volunteers. And I don't know if you have to go through 40 hours of orientation to be an advocacy volunteer, because it is primarily a research role, from what I understand. Also, remember that global virtual Pride event I talked about, where there's Pride through every time zone? Well, it's going to take an awful lot of time and volunteers to pull that off. So if you have some technical skills, if you have some marketing skills, or whatever skills you have to offer, I'm sure they can put you to work, because it's going to be a labor of love, and they will take all of the help they can get. Beyond that, most communities have some sort of LGBTQ centers. Here in Chicago, it's a center on Halsted. Lots of communities do. There's an organization called CenterLink that links the community centers, and they're listed at lgbtcenters.org. So within your own community, there are going to be unique volunteer needs that you can find out by reaching out directly to your local LGBT center. So think about all of that. So, between fun events like the live stream events, between the educational content that I talked about and the virtual volunteering, you should really have something for everyone this month. So here's a sample calendar of what that could look like. So we do have those ally actions every day. Rhodes Perry's his program. I would encourage you to post some sort of quote or reflection every day. Have a weekly happiness hour, some way just for your employees to connect. Doesn't have to involve alcohol, it can just be an opportunity to connect. And beyond that, it's already the second week of June, so I'm just going to talk through this stuff anyway. But again, have that virtual one-on-one 101 training. Announce if you work for an organization that has the resources, this would be a great time to announce some sort of LGBTQ scholarship. There's I know AT&T's employee resource group here in Chicago raised some money, and they created a scholarship for an LGBTQ young person to attend college, and they made that announcement, or they gave out the award this month. So it's pretty cool to see that sort of action, and lifting up others within our own community, young people within our own community. Again, hosting a virtual book club. a little late, but the Out and Equal kickoff was June 1st. They do have an Out and Equal brunch on June 15th. That's a free event as well. I would again encourage you to have a storytelling lunch and learn, podcast discussion group, present virtual volunteer opportunities like there is with Sage. And I've seen a lot of companies plan what they're calling a virtual pride parade. And what this really means is that they are asking their employees to send in photos of themselves celebrating Pride this year, perhaps, or maybe the way they've decorated their home for Pride, or maybe it's photos of their first Pride or Pride from the past. But they're collecting photos, and some organizations are putting together a video montage of these photos or videos from their employees, by city, and having some sort of musical backdrop, and basically putting together a video. I think that there are some organizations also relying heavily on TikTok to make some video content for a virtual Pride parade. I am not cool enough to be on TikTok yet. I've enjoyed some of the videos I've seen, but I don't know quite exactly how it works. But it sounds like a really fun way to plan a virtual Pride parade. But again, it's a way to get your employees engaged, participating, and having fun, looking for ways to just have fun. By the way, again, I've been talking a lot, so if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. If you have your own ideas, your own experiences, your own plans you want to share, put those in the chat as well. Again, keep that conversation going. The storytelling is so powerful to build empathy, to build real progress towards change. I would also encourage you to consider a movie night or TV night. And one of the films that I would recommend would be How to Survive a Plague, which is a documentary available on Netflix about the AIDS epidemic and the movement to actually get federal funding towards AIDS research, because there were a number of years in which gay men were dying and the federal government was ignoring them. And so it's really a powerful film about how we organized and created ACT UP and essentially forced the federal government to start caring about us, or at least investing into our community and this illness. So anyway, that's a powerful film to consider. Host a book club meeting. I didn't mention this book before, but another interesting book you can check out is Sissy by Jacob Tobiah. I listened to the audiobook of that, and it is a really interesting and fun. I mean, it's a funny book, memoir of a young non-binary person. I think Jacob is now in their 20s or early 30s, but basically the experience of being non-binary and what that's been like. And it's a really fun read or fun listen. Hosting a trivia event, I think, is again another way to engage folks in our history, in our culture. And there were two of the three trivia questions I asked you, you didn't get right. So even within our own community, there's a lot to learn about our own history. And I think it's fascinating stuff, personally. Week 4, Storytelling Lunch and Learn. The Lesbians Who Tech Summit coming up on week 4 is a week long of speakers, and I definitely sign up for this. It's free. Speakers are amazing. You see in that image, that is Angelica Ross, who was one of the stars of Pose. She was then on American Horror Story, but before she even became a well-known actress, she was the founder of Trans Tech Social Services, which provides job training, technical job training for Black trans women, because she herself is a Black trans woman. So she is an absolute inspiration, Angelica Ross. So she's one of the speakers, but other speakers include Beth Ford, who's the openly lesbian CEO of Land O'Lakes, Arlen Hamilton, who's the Black lesbian founder of Backstage Capital, which is a venture capital firm that invests in Black owned and other minority owned businesses. So there's some amazing speakers all throughout the Lesbians Who Tech Summit. And then there's also a couple of those live stream events happening the last week of June as well, the national ones. So you can have a packed month. There's pretty much something to do every day. And I think it's there's some great opportunities to have some powerful conversations. And again, I would encourage you again to really in whatever you do, reflect the diversity of our community, reflect the intersectionality of our community. Don't gloss over the history of our community and how it began and some of the leaders who were Black and brown. This is a really great time to amplify those voices within our own community and make sure they are not silenced. It's something that I'm personally very committed to, more than I've ever been. And if you follow me on LinkedIn, or if we connect on LinkedIn, every day I'm sharing a quote of a Black LGBTQ person and also a trivia question. So you can follow me to connect and get some of that content you can share within your own organization. I've also put together, like I mentioned before, I have some corporate clients who have booked our reflection kits. We have the webinars that I've talked about, the LGBTQ 101 and a few other webinars. We have an LGBT e-learning that can just be accessed at any time. Self-paced e-learning takes about 25 minutes. We provide the kit of quotes and trivia and lots of other stuff, depending on how high you go up in the packages. But certainly feel free. I'm not going to dig into all the different package content, but it's not too late. So if you are looking to provide your employees with some really top quality, high quality training with experienced facilitators who reflect the diversity of our community, besides just me, a cisgender white lesbian from the suburbs, then we can definitely talk about that. And I can help you figure out what that would look like. So if it would be helpful, you want the slides from this training today, you can go to theequalityinstitute.com/pride and you can download these slides. I don't know whether it's being recorded. So that is pretty much all I have. Any thoughts, any questions coming in? I don't see anything coming in in the chat, but if you do have any questions, I would love to hear them. If anyone from NGLCC wants to share other ideas or some ways to support LGBTBEs this month, I know there was a separate webinar about that, but feel free to go ahead.
First of all, thank you. And Sabrina will guide some questions that I know we'll have coming in, and we have opened up the line for everybody who would like to get in. But I thank you for that, and do want to let everyone know we'll, as we do every week, we'll be posting a blog post with a wrap out about this with your key takeaways. We'll link to your presentation and ways for folks to get involved with you and help with you to work. We are going to take, to your point, this is the time to be helping our fellow LGBTBEs and the business community, not only through the COVID recovery, but also since so many do make a considerable portion of their revenue every year from Pride sales and Pride opportunities. So I'm going to share a quick commercial that friends at The Advocate were kind enough to share worldwide, and a great way for you to see how we can support one another.
Thank you so much, Jonathan, for sharing that. You can actually view that and a number of other resources on powering your virtual Pride through LGBT business at nglcc.org/Pride 2020. Bernadette, I did get a direct question to my chat during the program. And first of all, thank you so much for that comprehensive overview. I learned a lot, and there's so many different innovative and creative ways to bring pride inside in this year. So I love what you're sharing. So this question saying, you mentioned Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera as the Black and brown trans women that led the efforts at Stonewall 51 years ago. Can you talk about, you shared some amazing resources around film, television, books. Are there any resources that you'd point to there specifically by Black and brown authors that are LGBTQs or trans that can help us as we educate ourselves, as we learn and unlearn during this time? You're on mute, sorry.
I can't think of any books that are like an LGBTQ 101 type book. The books that I think of are memoirs. So like Janet Mock has written 2 memoirs. I'm trying to think of, I know that Barbara Smith, who was a Black lesbian feminist, has also written a lot of books as well. But I'm going to have to do some more research on that, and I can get back to you on some other specific books that I would recommend that are written specifically by Black trans women. I wish that Angelica Ross would write a book, but I don't think she's done so yet.
She's a little busy, but I will say,
Yeah.
Brenda mentioned Eric Marcus and Making Gay History, and his podcast is putting a spotlight on intersectional minorities and their stories. Obviously, the book is incredible. He's been a long supporter of NGLCC, spoken at many of our corporate partners for Pride. But if you go to his website or his social media, they're sharing a lot of those stories written by, for, and even more exciting, audio and video discussions with intersectional queer leaders. So it's a great resource, and links to buy and support those platforms from those leaders and thinkers.
Absolutely. And if folks are interested too in the educational piece and deconstructing racism and oppression and are interested in books by LGBT authors in this regard, I would also check out the works of Angela Davis. She's phenomenal and has done a lot in this space as well, in deconstructing identity and oppression and so forth.
Any other questions or your own ideas?
Actually, we got one in at via email. Similarly, came into me, and I wanted to see if I can read this correctly while I have the PowerPoint window open. Can we hear more ideas about how to bring people into Pride that may otherwise think this moment has passed? And I know from the Facebook conversations I've had with this person who's sent this in, it's a great question. They're asking about, this moment where we're focusing on both LGBTQ pride, Black Lives Matter, COVID recovery. There's so many things that may be stealing focus. Do you recommend bringing that all together, and how we can bring, especially because we're not going to be downtown in a lot of big cities because of COVID, how do we bring people into the Pride fold, the conversation, the events, in a way that makes it understandable and helps them feel that relevance if they're a cis white ally, for example?
Yeah, I think that this is for those of you who work in organizations with employee resource groups, I think this is a really great time to have conversations with your Black employee resource group, with your women's employee resource group, and remind them of the diversity of LGBTQ, and invite the kinds of conversations that can be storytelling and that can reflect the intersectionality and the diversity of our community. So I think this is a great time for employee resource groups to collaborate on these kinds of discussions, because if you do have more than one marginalized identity, not everyone has time to join every group, right? So a lot of times people just pick one, and sometimes, lesbians are going to pick the women's group, and Black gay men are going to pick the Black group, right? Because they might choose one that is sort of their primary identity. So I think that this is a great time to have that type of collaboration and dialogue between some of the other groups within your organization, especially among folks who don't normally participate in LGBTQ events, parents as well. And a lot of time, some of the events that I mentioned, for example, the Family Equality Council event, it is opportunities to engage folks. There are opportunities to engage folks who don't always show up. But I think the more you can do to include the diversity of our community in the content that you share, the more successful you're going to be in bringing in diverse attendees and diverse engagement.
I think that's a great point, Bernadette. We, NGLCC helped release a film in 2017 called Families Like Yours, and it very much approaches LGBT families from an intersectional lens, good grief, lens, from race to ability to age to veterans and so on and so forth. And one of the most successful programs we've ever seen around a screening of that film was when a corporate partner spearheaded the film with their LGBT ERG and their family ERG, and subsequently invited all of the other groups that I just mentioned. And they received such a positive response, allies, folks from across the company who had never thought about thinking about LGBT issues in this lens. And it was from exactly like what you just said, from pulling across different pools of the organization, so they don't have to pick and choose where they're going, but seeing that these different groups have actually teamed up to become allies to one another, to share this content and educate one another. So I love that response. Thanks for pointing that out.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the bottom line with it is it has to be intentional. All of this has to be very deliberate. It's not going to happen by accident unless you are really focused on sharing and creating diverse content. Then the people that show up are probably going to be the people that always show up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Bernadette, thank you so much for presenting with us today. Folks, as we said earlier, you can see all of these recordings at nglcc.org/webinars or on the NGLCC blog. Tune in next Wednesday, June 17th, same time, 2 p.m. Eastern, for the 14th LGBTQ Community Survey findings, marketing insights, and key outreach. It'll be presented by our friends at CMI. We're very much looking forward to this discussion as we continue our Pride Month webinars and our Pride 365. Don't forget, twice monthly, we have LGBT Sip and Pitch Fridays. This week, it's this Friday, June 12th, 3 to 6 p.m. Eastern Time. It's an incredible time to learn from the companies that are pitching, to get an opportunity to pitch your business for the future, and to join us for some community and conversation. And this week, we'll be focusing on really important dialogues around the intersection of race, LGBTQ, and pride. So again, Bernadette, thank you so much for being with us. Everybody have a great day, and we'll see you back next week. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.